Thank you, Samantha, for your introduction and your friendship especially. Thank you. That trip was great, and one of the highlights was getting to know Samantha better. And thank you all for inviting me to speak here this morning. What a great crowd you are. You really are inspiring to me, so I thank you for that. I'd like to thank Steve as well for coming to meet with me this morning and sit with myself, some of my staff, and share about what all of you do in much more detail and get a better picture of suicide prevention efforts across Massachusetts. And thank you, Carly, for your everything you do every single day, but your willingness to also share your story. And thank you, Nicole, as well. Your stories, all of your stories, are so important, and we need to make sure that you all feel comfortable talking about them. We also talked a lot about the areas that we all still need to work on. I want to thank you all for what you do every single day and your commitment to suicide prevention, and in particular, your focus on survivor support as well. I'd like to acknowledge Senator Joan Lovely that's here, and Senator John Keenan, and as well Health and Human Services Secretary Mary Lou Sutters. All three have been champions for mental health services and mental illness across the years. And Mary Lou Sutters and I, years going way back, 10, 15 or more years, have talked a lot about mental health services and the need to expand them in our Commonwealth. So thank you for your partnership as well and your dedication in these areas. Suicide is an area, it's a subject that most people would prefer not to think about or talk about. But all of you here help make sure that the work is getting done to assist those touched by suicide. So again, on behalf of the Commonwealth, from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to start out by thanking you. Last month, I stood before the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce and called for, and I quote, "nothing less than a transformative approach to how we think about, how we talk about, and how we provide care for mental health issues." This may seem like an odd thing to say in front of an audience of business people, but it reflects my strong belief that mental health affects every single aspect of our lives. I also wanted to give the clear signal that issues of behavioral and mental health will no longer be dealt with in the shadows. For all of our sakes, we must put them front and center. This issue is personal to me. I have dear friends who lost siblings, parents, daughters or sons who died by suicide. I had a father who had, I'd say, severe mental illness, particularly coming on when I was about 8 years old and into my adolescence. It caused him to have a severe heart attack. He was very stressed out. When I get up in front of groups like this, I don't know how much I'm going to share. I don't write anything out because I believe that it has to come from the heart. But it really impacted, and I learned how much mental illness can impact not only the individual that is working through it, but the family and the extended family and the ripple effect. My father would come home, and we never knew, was this a good day or a bad day? So I'd walk around on eggshells until I could figure that out. Can I stay in the kitchen or on the first floor of our house, or should I, zoom upstairs and bring my younger brother and sister with me to sort of help protect them from what he was going through. We didn't fully, of course, understand what he was going through. This was also decades ago, and things were so bad that one time my mother and I went to a psychiatrist, well-known psychiatrist in the New York area, and related our story as to how things were going on. And I could never imagine this happening today, but the psychiatrist gave us a prescription for Halidol, colorless, odorless, tasteless, pretty powerful tranquilizer, and said, just sneak this into his tea or his food. That'll help, sort of make him more calm. Now, here I am about 17, 18 years old, thinking, this is great. He's claiming that we are poisoning his food, and guess what? We are trying to poison his food. And it didn't work because it was irregular and sporadic that I could even do it or my mother could do it. But it was a real learning experience. And of course, he would not seek treatment. He was a strong man. It wasn't him, it was everybody else in the world. So I can tell you in all honesty, he gave me, though, some real strong, bittersweet gifts. It took me a while to also work through that. I became a social worker, right, into college, surprise, and worked with children and families. But he also, I heard the story, taught me how to care and how to love. And you may not always like another person at a time, but you always love another person. And he taught me how to share hope, and that there is always a better tomorrow, and we need to work for that. So, when I was in social work school, I worked at a telephone hotline and crisis intervention service and got trained in crisis intervention in Ithaca, upstate New York, where I went to school. Moved to Boston, was a social worker, and then went to law school and became a labor and employment attorney, et cetera. I never thought that I'd ever be a legislator. That just was not in my thought process. But the opportunity arose, and I could say, for issues like now, to be able to come back to mental health is such a unique and powerful gift to be able to do this and try to make sure that we get rid of the stigma of mental illness and have true mental health parity. Thank you. I remember the first time in the State House that I ever spoke publicly about my father and his struggles with mental illness. It was when Beth Child was Secretary of Mental Health, Department of Mental Health, giving out an award to an organization that started a jail diversion program in Framingham, one of my communities. And she asked me, do you want to give this to them? And I said yes, and I'm standing on the platform like this and thinking, God, do I share why these issues are so important? And I could feel my heart pounding and breathing. I mean, I was really nervous, and I did it. And it also felt very freeing, and I realized that we need to talk about these issues. And afterwards, over half of the people in the audience came up to me and said, thank you for mentioning that. My father also struggled from mental illness, or my mother did, or my siblings still does. And it just really impressed upon me, the more we talk about it, the better off we all are. So, and most of those people are to this day still, because of the stigma, people are still afraid and feel like they need to hide out of sometimes either embarrassment or shame associated because of the overwhelming stigma that we have historically attached to talking about mental health. And I really believe that that stigma is dangerous. It prevents far too many people from feeling like they can talk openly about their illness or their loved one's illness. And it prevents far, far too many people from seeking treatment. And it perpetuates the idea that those living with mental illness, addiction, or other behavioral health challenges must continue to do that in silence. And we all know, sadly all too well, that silence can cost people their lives. We must take away that power that silence has over all of us when it comes to our personal experiences with mental illness. Because if we take away the power of silence, we can also reduce the risk of suicide. By providing a place to talk, Samaritans helps take away that power of silence for individuals who are struggling. And by providing a place for survivors to share their stories, Samaritans takes away the power of silence to those that are left behind. Throughout Massachusetts, I'd like to break the power of silence for all of us touched by mental illness in whatever way they are. That's why I am pleased to announce that the current Senate budget, in addition to the $400,000 for Samaritans, it includes $10 million in new funding to support our efforts in It'll support our efforts, thank you, in mental and behavioral health. These new funds, we created a reserve. Some of it will go, we allocated some of it in the budget for some programs that I'll mention, and the rest of it, Senator Julian Cyr, the chair of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, is meeting with people and looking at what other ways can we really target, children of all ages, adults and people, to really help break the stigma and achieve parity. So some of the new funds and the hope is to expand access for services for every region and for all residents, increase the number of well-trained practitioners, shore up our efforts to increase mental health parity, and instill awareness that mental health care is health care, so that everyone feels confident asking for the help they deserve, and we can break the silence and end the stigma once and for all. In my position as Senate President, I am asked to speak often about the priorities of the state. These conversations usually focus on the same types of issues. How do we fix our transportation system, which is another story. I'm sure all of you had a wonderful commute to this breakfast this morning. How do we fix and reform our education funding? And how do we create greater economic vitality and more affordable housing, among other things? There's a lot of talk about how much money we take in and how much money we spend and send out. And we often define success by how well we are doing economically. If I accomplish nothing else in my tenure as leader of the Senate, I hope that we can expand our definition of success to include terms like connection, resilience, acceptance, supporting every single resident, every single individual for who they are. Kindness, we need to get back to being kind. Belonging, emotional safety, and hope. Hope to work to truly prevent suicide. We are all in this together, and we must take care of each other. You do the hard work of caring for those struggling, the most every single day. And my colleagues and I are so grateful to you for that. But to be truly successful, we must make mental health and mental and emotional health part of our routine care. It must be, if somebody is struggling with mental health issues, they go to the doctor the same way as if they were struggling with diabetes or a cardiac issue. And if it doesn't work the first time, they can go back a second or third time and work through it. And we must make it easier for people to be able to do that. This is Massachusetts, after all. I might be a little biased, but we have the best minds here. We're the hub of innovation. We have the best academic institutions. We're known to have the best healthcare systems. We have the best Secretary of Health and Human Services. If any state can do this, Massachusetts can do this. You have my promise that I will fight for mental health care in the Commonwealth for as long as it takes, and I hope that you will join me. Thank you very much.